Your computer is dying right now, and you don't even know it yet. Not because of a virus, not because of a hacker sitting in some dark basement targeting you specifically. No, this is way worse than that. The thing that is quietly killing your PC right now is a company you trust. A company that has been inside your computer since the day you turned it on for the very first time. And what they just did, with a single update, has sent millions of Windows users into an absolute panic. So before you close this video, before you go back to whatever you were doing, I need you to understand something. If you are running Windows 10 or Windows 11 right now, you need to see this. Because what is happening is not being talked about the way it should be. And by the time most people find out, it will already be too late. Let's go back to May 12th, 2026, Patch Tuesday. That is the day Microsoft rolls out its monthly batch of security updates. It is supposed to be routine. It is supposed to be the day your PC gets a little safer, a little more protected, a little better. And for most people, it is just a notification they click on, let it run in the background, and forget about. But this time, something went very, very wrong. Microsoft pushed out a security update called KB 5089549 for Windows 11 versions 24H2 and 25H2. That update was supposed to fix 120 security vulnerabilities, 17 of them rated as critical. Critical. That means actively dangerous. That means hackers could use those 17 holes in your system to get in, take over, steal data, encrypt your files, and demand a ransom. So yes, you absolutely needed this update. And yes, Microsoft absolutely needed to push it out. But what actually happened when millions of people tried to install it? Their computers choked, their updates stalled, and then Windows did something that would make your heart drop. It rolled back. Error code 0SATANT0922. Your update could not be installed. Please try again. Except trying again didn't work either. Again and again the update would start, get to around 35%, hit that wall during the reboot phase, and crash back to where it started. Millions of people refreshing Windows Update over and over, getting nowhere, becoming more frustrated by the hour, and all the while those 17 critical vulnerabilities sitting wide open on their systems, unpatched, exposed. So what actually caused this? Because Microsoft does not just say sorry and move on. Eventually they had to come out and explain what went wrong, and the answer is something that most everyday Windows users have never even heard of: the EFI system partition. Now, I know that sounds incredibly technical, so let me break it down as simply as I possibly can. Inside your computer's storage drive, your SSD or your hard disk, there's a small hidden section called the EFI system partition. You never see it. You never interact with it. It sits quietly on your drive doing one very important job. It helps your computer start up. When you press that power button, before Windows even begins to load, your computer reads this tiny partition to figure out how to boot itself. Think of it like the ignition system in a car. You never think about it. You just turn the key. But if the ignition fails, the car is not going anywhere. Now here is where the problem comes in. This partition is small, very small, usually under 100 megabytes. And for most computers, that is completely fine because Windows does not constantly write to it. It stays lean, it stays clean, and it does its job without any issues. But here's the thing that Microsoft discovered, and this is critical to understand. Some computers, over time, have had their EFI system partition quietly fill up. How does that happen? BIOS updates. Firmware updates from your PC manufacturer. Every time your laptop or desktop maker pushed out an update to your system firmware, it sometimes left files behind in that tiny partition. Little by little, update by update, that space shrank. And if your EFI system partition reached 10 megabytes or less of free space, just 10 megabytes, the May 2026 Windows Update could not finish installing. It needed room in that partition during the reboot phase to complete its work. No room? No update. Error 0SATANT0922. Rollback. Start over. And you are stuck. Now you might be thinking, okay, so some computers failed to update, Microsoft will fix it, life goes on. And you would be partly right. Microsoft did release a fix, an optional update, KB 5089573, that addresses the root cause, so this EFI space issue should not block your updates going forward. Good. Problem solved, right? Well, not exactly. Because here is what a lot of people are not talking about. During the time between May 12th, when the broken update dropped, and whenever your specific machine received the fix, those 17 critical vulnerabilities were sitting there, open, waiting. And that is just one part of the story. Because while the May update disaster was making headlines and flooding tech forums with panicked users who could not get their PCs updated, something much, much bigger was quietly approaching. Something that has been building for 15 years. Something that Microsoft knew about for years and is now racing against a hard calendar deadline that does not move for anyone. June 24th, 2026. Mark that date. Because on that day, the first of 3 cryptographic certificates that have been the security foundation of virtually every Windows PC built since 2012 will officially expire. Let me say that again so it sinks in. The certificates, the digital trust anchors, that have been sitting inside your computer's motherboard since it was manufactured, the ones that have been quietly ensuring that every time you turn on your PC, nothing malicious has hijacked the boot process, those certificates are dying. And when they do, millions of computers will be left standing in a security no man's land that most of their owners have absolutely no idea about. To understand why this matters so much, you have to understand what Secure Boot actually does. When you press the power button on your PC, a lot happens before you ever see the Windows logo. Your computer's firmware, the software baked into your motherboard, runs first, it checks the hardware, it figures out what drives are attached, and then it tries to hand off control to the Windows bootloader, the software that actually starts loading the operating system. Now, Secure Boot is the security guard that stands at that handoff point. Its job is to check the digital signature of everything that tries to run during that process. It looks at the bootloader and asks, is this legitimate? Is this signed by a certificate I trust? If yes, proceed. If no, stop everything and throw an error. This is incredibly powerful protection because it catches threats that no antivirus software can see. Malware that lives before Windows starts, called bootkits, can be completely invisible to your security software because they load so early in the process that Windows itself never even knows they are there. Secure Boot stops them at the door, or at least it is supposed to. And it has been doing that job faithfully since 2012, all running on a set of cryptographic certificates issued by Microsoft back in 2011. Certificates that were given a 15-year lifespan. Certificates that are now, in the summer of 2026, reaching the end of that lifespan. 3 specific certificates are involved in this expiration. The first is the Microsoft Corporation KEK CA 2011, which expires June 24th, 2026. The second is the Microsoft Corporation UEFI CA 2011, which expires June 27th, 2026. And the third, and arguably the most critical, is the Microsoft Windows Production PCA 2011, the certificate that directly signs the Windows bootloader itself, which expires October 19th, 2026. 3 certificates, 3 expiration dates. One enormous problem for millions of computers around the world. Now, before panic fully sets in, let me be very precise about what actually happens when these certificates expire, because some of the headlines around this have been misleading, and I refuse to do that to you. Your PC will not suddenly stop booting on June 25th. You will not wake up in the morning and find a dead machine. Windows will still start, your files will still be there. Regular Windows updates, your normal monthly patches, will still install. The day-to-day function of your computer is not immediately affected, but here is what you will lose, and this is where the real danger lives. Once those old certificates expire, and if your computer has not received the new 2023 replacement certificates, your system will permanently lose the ability to receive security updates for the boot process itself. No more updates to the Windows Boot Manager, no more additions to the Secure Boot Revocation list. That is the list of software that Microsoft has flagged as compromised and should be blocked from running. No more mitigations for newly discovered boot-level vulnerabilities. You are still running, but you are running exposed. And not just a little exposed. The kind of exposed where if a new bootkit malware is discovered, like Black Lotus, which is an actual real-world UEFI bootkit that exploits exactly this kind of gap, your computer has no way to defend itself. Your antivirus will not see it. Your firewall will not stop it. It loads before all of them, and you have no protection. Microsoft has been working on this for years. They are not caught off guard. They began rolling out their replacement 2023 Secure Boot certificates through Windows Update, pushing new certificates down to supported devices, and working with PC manufacturers to release the firmware updates necessary to make the transition smooth. Many PCs manufactured since 2024 already have the new 2023 certificates installed. If you have a newer machine and you keep it updated, you are probably fine. Probably. But here is where this story gets genuinely grim. Here is where millions of real people with real computers are going to get left behind. Windows 10 users. Let's talk about them. Microsoft ended mainstream support for Windows 10 in October 2025. That was a massive deal. Hundreds of millions of computers, still working, still perfectly functional machines, suddenly no longer receiving standard security updates. Microsoft told those users to upgrade to Windows 11 or pay for extended security updates at a cost of around $30 per year per device, rising annually. But here is the brutal truth that Microsoft will not put in a big flashing warning on your screen. Windows 11 has hardware requirements that specifically locked out an enormous number of older but still functional computers. The most notorious requirement is TPM2, 0, a security chip that older machines simply do not have. These are computers from 2017, 2018, 2019, machines that are 5, 6, 7 years old, not ancient museum pieces, computers that run just fine, that people use every single day, that have no performance problems whatsoever. But Microsoft drew a line and said, if you do not have TPM2. 0. You cannot run Windows 11 officially, which means these machines are stuck on Windows 10, which means they stopped receiving standard security updates in October 2025, which now also means they will not receive the new secure boot certificates, which means by late June 2026, they will be falling behind on boot level security with absolutely no official remedy from Microsoft. Upgrade to hardware you cannot necessarily afford, or stay on a system that is slowly losing its defenses one expiring certificate at a time. And this is not a small number of people we are talking about. Estimates have suggested that at the time, Windows 10 support ended somewhere between 240 and 400 million PCs were still running it. Not all of them are TPM2, 0 deficient. Some of those users can upgrade to Windows 11 and have chosen not to, or have not gotten around to it yet. But tens of millions of them genuinely cannot. Their hardware does not qualify. Their machines are caught in this gap. Old enough to be locked out of Windows 11, recent enough that throwing them away feels wasteful and expensive, and now vulnerable enough that the security foundation underneath them is quietly crumbling. There is also the dual boot problem that IT professionals and Linux users are very aware of. If you run a machine that boots both Windows and Linux, the secure boot certificate transition is not straightforward. Linux bootloaders rely on their own signing certificates, and the transition from the 2011 to the 2023 certificates involves updating the trust database in your firmware. If that is handled incorrectly, or if your firmware manufacturer does not release an update that properly supports the new configuration, you could end up in a situation where your Linux bootloader is suddenly untrusted by the updated secure boot system. Boot failures. System inaccessible, not bricked permanently, but the kind of failure that sends non-technical users into full panic mode thinking their computer is destroyed. Enterprise environments face their own version of this nightmare. Corporate IT departments manage thousands or tens of thousands of machines, often with complex configurations, legacy software, specific firmware versions that were tested and locked in for stability reasons. The idea of rolling out secure boot certificate updates across an entire enterprise fleet is not a click and forget Windows Update situation. It requires testing. It requires coordination with hardware vendors. It requires verifying that BitLocker, Microsoft's drive encryption system, does not throw machines into recovery mode because the boot configuration changed. It requires verifying that none of the specialized software these organizations run breaks when the boot chain is updated. Microsoft has published guidance. They have released playbooks for IT administrators. They have tried to make this manageable. But manageable is not the same as easy, and in the enterprise world, easy is the only thing that actually happens on schedule. Let's take a step back and look at this from the widest possible view. Because when you line everything up, the failed May 2026 update that left millions of machines unable to install critical security patches, while 17 serious vulnerabilities sat open, the approaching expiration of the secure boot certificates that have protected the boot process of every Windows PC since 2012, the hundreds of millions of Windows 10 machines that have been cut off from updates and now face a secondary wave of security degradation, when you put all of that together, what you're looking at is a slow motion crisis, not a single dramatic explosion. Not one morning where the internet goes dark and every PC stops working, but a gradual, steady erosion of security across an enormous installed base of computers, much of it invisible to the people actually using those machines. And that invisibility is the most dangerous part. If your PC stopped booting, you would know immediately. You would panic, you would call someone, you would do something. But if your PC keeps booting, keeps running your apps, keeps letting you check your email and watch videos and do your work, and the only thing that is silently degrading is your protection against the most sophisticated class of malware. The kind that installs itself before Windows loads, the kind that survives a Windows reinstall, the kind that can maintain access to your machine permanently, you would have no idea. You would feel completely safe while being completely exposed. And that is exactly the scenario that a certain category of sophisticated threat actor absolutely lives for. Let's talk about Black Lotus for a moment. Because it is not hypothetical. It is not a theoretical future threat that researchers have cooked up in a lab to demonstrate a risk. Black Lotus is a real UEFI bootkit that was discovered actively in the wild. It exploits vulnerabilities in the boot chain of Windows machines. It is capable of disabling security features, including Windows Defender. It is capable of surviving operating system reinstallation because it does not live in Windows. It lives in the EFI partition, in the earliest stages of the boot process. It has been sold on criminal forums. It has been used in real attacks, and the defense against it. The ongoing ability to update the secure boot revocation database, to push security mitigations for the boot process, to keep the boot chain's defenses current, that defense is exactly what the expiring certificates protect. Take away the ability to update those boot level defenses, and Black Lotus and whatever comes after, it becomes significantly harder to stop. Microsoft knows this. Microsoft has been very explicit about it in their official documentation. They have stated directly that the expiring certificates stop systems from receiving security fixes for the Windows Boot Manager and secure boot components. They have warned that compromised security at startup threatens the overall security of affected Windows devices, especially due to bootkit malware. They are not hiding the risk. They are just counting on the vast majority of users keeping their systems updated, which would give them the new 2023 certificates automatically, maintain their boot level security, and prevent this from becoming a catastrophe. And for a lot of users, that is exactly what will happen. Updated machines, modern firmware, smooth transition. But for the ones who fall through the cracks, the Windows 10 users with hardware that cannot run Windows 11, the enterprise machines whose firmware has not been updated, the older laptops where the manufacturer has stopped releasing firmware updates entirely because the device is considered end of life. For those machines, and there are millions of them, the protection just quietly stops improving, and the threat landscape keeps advancing regardless. What can you actually do right now? This is the part that matters. Not panic, not despair. Practical action. First, check your Windows version. If you're on Windows 11 and keeping it updated, you are very likely already receiving the new Secure Boot 2023 certificates as part of your regular monthly updates. Microsoft has been rolling them out through Windows Update for supported systems. Keep updating. That is the single most important thing. Second, check your BIOS or UEFI firmware version. Go to your PC manufacturer's support website. Look up your specific model. Check if there is a firmware update available. If there is, and if your system is one that needs it to successfully transition to the new Secure Boot certificates, apply that update. Yes, firmware updates can feel intimidating. Yes, they carry a small risk if they go wrong. But leaving your boot security permanently frozen in 2011 is a bigger long-term risk. Third, if you are on Windows 10 and your hardware supports Windows 11, seriously reconsider upgrading. Microsoft's free upgrade path ended, but there are still ways to move to Windows 11 on supported hardware. The certificate transition alone is a compelling reason to make that move. Fourth, if you are running Windows 10 on hardware that genuinely cannot run Windows 11, start having an honest conversation with yourself about what comes next. Extended security. Updates buy you some time. They do not solve the underlying problem of boot-level security degradation from expired certificates. Eventually, these machines need to be replaced or repurposed with a Linux distribution that does not have these same constraints. Fifth, and this is specifically for anyone who saw error code 0x800F0922 on their Windows 11 machine after the May 2026 update, go to Windows Update, check for optional updates, and install KB508973. This is the fix Microsoft released for the EFI system partition space problem. Once you have it installed, your monthly updates should proceed normally, and the root cause of those installation failures has been addressed. If you are still having trouble after that, the Microsoft Update Catalog is where you can manually download and install updates directly. For IT administrators watching this, and I know you are here, Microsoft has published a secure boot playbook specifically for enterprise environments navigating this certificate transition. It walks through the sequencing, the BitLocker considerations, the pilot testing recommendations, the group policy requirements for enterprise managed devices. Read it. Take it seriously. This is not a trivial transition, and the window for doing it in a controlled, deliberate way is closing fast. Now, let me zoom back out one final time, because I think there's a larger point here that deserves to be said clearly. What we are watching unfold in 2026 is the result of a compounding series of decisions and consequences that stretch back years. Microsoft's decision to end Windows 10 support on the schedule they chose, while simultaneously imposing hardware requirements for Windows 11 that excluded hundreds of millions of still functional machines, created a massive population of locked-out users. The 15-year lifespan of the 2011 Secure Boot certificates, baked into hardware at the time, was always going to create this moment of transition. The fact that the May 2026 Patch Tuesday update shipped with a bug that caused installation failures affecting the very security patches people needed most is just the latest example of what happens when an operating system has to run across an almost incomprehensible variety of hardware configurations, firmware versions, partition layouts, and software environments. Windows is everywhere. It is on gaming rigs and hospital machines and industrial control systems, and the laptop your grandmother uses to video call the family. Keeping all of those systems secure all of the time is genuinely one of the hardest engineering challenges in the world. That does not mean Microsoft gets a pass every time something goes wrong. It means we need to understand that these are not simple problems, and the solutions are rarely as clean as a press release makes them sound. What is clear is this: if you are a Windows user in 2026 and you are not paying attention to what your operating system is doing, if you are dismissing update notifications, if you have not thought about whether your machine qualifies for Windows 11, if you have not checked whether the May update successfully installed, if you have no idea what secure boot even is, you are potentially one of the millions of people whose security is quietly degrading right now without a single warning light going off anywhere on your screen. The updates that are supposed to keep you safe are failing silently on some machines. The certificates that are supposed to keep the boot process trustworthy are counting down to expiration. And the category of malware that exploits boot-level vulnerabilities is real, actively developed, and sold commercially to threat actors who are very much paying attention to all of this. This is not a drill. This is not fear-mongering to get views. These are documented facts from Microsoft's own support pages, from Windows Central, from the Register, from Gadget Hacks, from Malwarebytes, from Windows Latest. Every major Windows and security publication has covered different pieces of this story. What I have tried to do today is put all of those pieces together in one place so that you have the full picture. Because you deserve the full picture. Because your security depends on understanding not just that something went wrong, but what specifically went wrong, why it went wrong, who it affects, and what you can do about it right now. So here is your action list one more time, because this matters enough to repeat. Update Windows. Check for the optional KB5089573 fix if you saw error 0x800 wherever for now or 922. Update your BIOS and firmware from your manufacturer's website. If you are on Windows 10 and eligible for Windows 11, seriously consider upgrading. If you are not eligible, plan your next steps. And if you manage PCs for an organization, read Microsoft's Secure Boot Playbook and start acting on it before June 24th arrives. Your computer is not dead yet, but Microsoft is at the door. Whether what comes next helps you or hurts you depends almost entirely on what you do in the next few weeks. The deadline is real. The risk is real. And the window to act without consequence is closing faster than most people realize. Stay updated, stay protected, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because I promise you, they have no idea any of this is happening.